Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Dear listener, I hope you're well. It's very hard to focus on seasonal festivities this year when we can see the worst atrocities taking place. It's a real struggle, makes us feel helpless, and that can lead us to lose hope. But I just want to add that what I'm also noticing is people gathering everywhere with intentions of love and refusing to be shut down, showing solidarity with those suffering, checking in with each other to make sure we're all okay, and that deep knowing of what is really wrong and what really isn't working. And I believe it's forcing people to wake up to what is actually important to them and holding loved ones closer. And we are making space in our hearts for our brothers and sisters in need wherever they are in the world. I'm on a psychotherapy training course the last few months, and something quite mind-blowing happened last month. I was meditating and I decided to move my attention to my heart area and experience the space in my heart. I'd never done this before. As soon as I did, I was taken aback by the sheer expanse we have in our hearts. I usually place my attention at my third eye when I'm meditating and feel myself leave the body. And this is something I've done for years, and I just find it really spacious there, and to take some peaceful time there, that indigo chakra. And I don't know why I'd never tried the same with my heart. But try this and you'll see what I mean. Once I was there, I tried a few experiments, like what could I fit in this heart space? Could I fit all the people I love and still have room? Could I fit all the people who I find it hard to love? And then I tried fitting all the people who are suffering. And yes, it still felt like I could do that. It was a real epiphany for me. I never knew how infinitely able we are to love everyone. It's not always easy to do it, but we can do it. It's a process for sure, particularly at the moment. But even trying that for a matter of minutes helped me. We are at the magical time of Solstice, and you are about to hear the most astounding share. It helps to believe in the magic of this world, especially at times like this. Throughout history, we as human beings communed with the land, much the same as we might have communed with divinities. It was the same approach, and a similar relationship. We've largely forgotten this, but we soon remember when we really feel a location reaches into our hearts and lifts our spirits. We've all been to certain locations that just move us to emotion with a strong sense of connection. The experience in this episode was a meeting with an otherworldly beast that had the body of a fat pony, but with a man's face. This took place at winter solstice, when the boundaries between our material realm and that of the other realms bend. And at this time, and as with other turns in the cycle at spring and autumn equinox and summer solstice, at Imbolc, Beltane, Lughnasadh and Samhain, we are shifting gear and transitioning towards the new. The full-length episode on Patreon includes another encounter with the same person, and that was with a being related again to a horse, this time a white horse, and an altogether different experience, one aligned with love and beauty. I feel that a heart union between people can shift the world. I truly believe that, and in that story perhaps their love for each other and for the land invoked the presence of the lady, potentially a physical manifestation of a sacred location or a beautiful setting. To hear that full-length version, find us on Patreon. I want to thank my incredible curious crew on Patreon for supporting me this year and ensuring this project continues to exist. for you and all listeners. It has been great to discuss ideas together and share information. I've got to know many of you over the months and years, and you are my dear friends. It really feels like a warm, safe community, and I'm so heartened to see how much you respect and support each other too, in the Zooms and community chats. We will be meeting this very night for the Christmas get-together on Zoom, and next month's Zoom we will be with the guest from this episode, and they're going to be joining us and sharing some of their magical practices with us. So I hope you can join us for that. I hope you enjoy this episode, and I will see you at the end for a quick chat. Time to
It was in 2013, in winter, December, and me and my then partner, we just wanted to get away from all the pre-Christmas stress, just a couple of days around the winter solstice. And I found on the internet this lovely isolated cottage or little farmhouse, and it was in like the rural part of Lower Austria. I don't know if you're familiar with Austria. We have like these famous sites like Vienna and Salzburg and the mountain areas. And then there are like really rural areas nobody really knows. And that was one of them. And it's like a 1.5 hours drive away from where I live now. And it's really in the middle of nowhere. And me and my then partner, we went there. And the weather was all right, but it was really cold. And we arrived there at around noon or early afternoon. And it was literally like in the middle of nowhere. It was like a little tiny cottage, or we have these things, mostly they belong to farmhouses, bigger farmhouses, we call press houses. And that's where like people used to press the fruits for making cider or this kind of cider.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was like a gatehouse or something. So it definitely belonged to a bigger farm, but we couldn't see the farm. Like it was like probably part of an estate, but this was this tiny cottage. It was surrounded by a lovely garden, and around the garden there was like on one side the street, and on the other side there were like this deep forest, like a forest, yeah. And we couldn't see any other houses. It was like situated in a valley. And yeah, when we arrived, there were like the owner and his wife, and the house looked really all right and lovely. They had the fire crackling in the fireplace, and
sounds good.
Yeah, especially now. It's really freezing here in Austria as well. So yeah, and they introduced themselves, and it felt kind of hostile and unfriendly. And at the time I thought, well, probably they expected like a heterosexual couple, and they didn't expect like a same-sex couple. But now I'm not sure if it really was that. I'm just not sure. And they had the wife brought this lovely big plate of Christmas bakery, like this traditional Christmas bakery. And she left it with us, so I guess it was all right. But they really looked like unfriendly, and the atmosphere was kind of hostile. Yeah, so they showed us around and they gave us the keys, and they left. And I remember we spent the afternoon like packing away our stuff and preparing something to eat, and just checking out the garden. And my then partner was a heavy smoker. He spent a lot of time in the garden, just smoking one cigarette after the other. is really unhealthy. Don't do that at home. Yeah, and then in the evening it starts snowing, and yeah, it turned almost into a kind of snowstorm. It was really stormy and heavy snowfall. So even my partner went inside.
You snowed off.
Yeah, he did. And yeah, and we spent the evening sitting in this kitchen lounge area, like a parlor. There was a parlor, and this kitchen upstairs. There was a bedroom,
Mm.
and the house was really old with like really low ceilings. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
tiny windows, yeah,
Mm.
and this kind of dark wooden traditional Austrian furniture.
Lovely.
It was lovely, but as it got darker, it was kind of like this weird atmosphere.
Yeah.
And anyway, we spent the evening there. We I was reading, and we had an argument, but I don't know what it was about. It was
Mm.
like, I have to say, it was like at the time our relationship was crumbling away already. So it was a difficult
Right.
time
Yeah.
for him and for me, especially for me. It was like the day before that, 2012, one of my sisters died.
Oh,
A
wow.
really difficult time. I was starting my own business. I'm a
Mm.
trained social worker and training courses now. I'm working as an external lecturer. But at the time, I was just starting that. And
Yeah.
I guess you know what I'm talking about. Is like the first part of
Oh,
like it's really difficult. Yeah. Yeah. And that was a difficult time. And we had a lot of arguments at that time. Maybe it was just like I was just thinking, I reckon if that was our last trip together, our last holiday.
wow.
We only had like a couple of months left, yeah. And we just spent this kind of awkward evening together. And I reckon it must have been between 11 and midnight. And we got like tired a bit. But all of a sudden, my then partner pointed toward one of the windows, and he was like, "Look, look." And as I was looking, I was seeing a face of a man, really like shaggy hair, and a really grim expression, like if he was angry. And he had these weird ears, like animal ears. And he was just staring at us. And I could see him as clear as I can see you now, yeah,
Yeah.
like right in front of the window. And we were scared, but it was like not like you would imagine it, us to be scared, yeah, because like the I would say like 10 minutes before that, the atmosphere changed and it got really weird. It was really quiet in the house and quiet outside, and we were just hearing these kind of bells like you would hear in Christmas movies, like almost in Christmas
Yes.
movies, like when Santa arrives, you can always hear those bells.
So
And we,
like more of a tinkling, a sort of.
yeah, tinkling sound, yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, and then we saw this face of this man, and he was like pale, but his face was surrounded. I wouldn't say it was a beard like my beard, but it was surrounded by shaggy fur and a dark fur, like brownish black fur. And his face was pale, really pale and wrinkly, and he had these evil, glaring eyes and really sharp teeth.
Yeah.
And we had this shock moment where we were like, oh, look, look, and we're just staring at him. And then he turned away and seemed to vanish within the like snow outside. And we ran to the window and opened it. And then we saw him. And it was like not really a him, it was like a horse, or I always say it looked like a fat pony, a really bulky horse like figure with this human head.
Wow.
And it was running in circles around the garden and making these funny bell noises. And we were shouting something just to make it go away, but it wouldn't go away. And it was just turned around and staring at us really angrily. Yeah. And after time, like it was circling the whole house. Felt like I don't know, it felt for ages. But then the snow got really bad and it all came, the wind was blowing the snowflakes inside. And we shut the windows. And then, and that was so weird, we just decided to go upstairs to the bedroom. And we did. And we lay there for like, I don't know, hours or something. Yeah. We hardly got any sleep. But we didn't really talk. We just said, well, that's weird, that's scary, that's frightening. But we didn't really talk about that. And now I'm wondering why we didn't. But anyway, the next day, I remember we got up really early, as you can imagine. I'm really tired. And we just said that was weird last night, but we wouldn't talk about that really. And we had this one day there to go, and I can't really remember. I think we went for a walk or something. But when we stepped outside the house and went into the garden, which was like really full of snow, we saw these hoof marks in the snow. There was this proof. And again, we were like, oh, that's weird, but yeah, just move on with our walk. Yeah. And we just went on a walk through the forest, which felt kind of hostile too. Yeah, and I don't really remember how we spent the whole day. It was an awkward situation, not very pleasant. And the next day we were supposed to leave, and we just left the keys on the table, on the kitchen table. But when we signed the guest book they had, yeah, I found the page like from summer, or the year before. I can't remember the date, but there was this. I think it was a children's drawing. I think it must have been a child that drew that image of exact the same creature or entity we saw. It was this like horse-like creature with a human head, and that really freaked me out. He said, well, that's really, really frightening. That's so scary. Just go. Yeah, just go home. And we just left, yeah. But again, we didn't really talk about that much. And that was basically it in a nutshell, like the whole experience. And as I wrote to you, I almost forgot about the whole thing. And it was only recently when I came across your podcast, yeah, that triggered really that memory. Oh my God, that is so weird, yeah. And then when I wrote the email to you, all of a sudden there was another experience that popped up in my head, which was more pleasant. And that's not that long ago. It's with my now husband. I think it was like the year before Corona started, before all the madness. And it was just like we have a garden just like 2 kilometers away from where we live. Yeah. And it's really nice. This is like a hill, and on the top of the hills are all these organic gardens, this community garden thing. And behind that, there's a little valley and a field and really old trees. And we were doing a picnic, I think, yeah. It's still a place we love, yeah, because it's very close to our garden, and we go there for walks a lot of times. And it's always like the hour when the sun sets, you have a lovely view over the city where we live, and it's a really magical place. and it was around that time, yeah, and we had a picnic there, and the sun set, and then it got darker, and then we saw this, yeah, out of nothing really, this white, but that time it was white. This again a horse-like figure, and telling you that I'm feeling mad already. But it was
No.
again a horse-like figure, but it was nothing like the other figure, like the other entity. It was
Yes.
like really beautiful, a white horse, and it sometimes looked at if it were led by a white a woman, completely glowing white woman, and
Mm.
sometimes it felt just being the horse, yeah, but it was
Yes.
glowing, yeah. It was like almost like a horse made of moonshine or something.
Oh, wow.
And we saw that it was just like crossing from the fields through the valley to, and up the next hill, and then it vanished into the forest which is there.
Mm.
And we both saw it again. So yeah, there must there must be some connection between me, horses,
Yes.
and my relationships. But I'm not I don't do any horse riding. I'm not into horses. Yeah, I never had a horse, so I don't know. Yeah, it felt it felt good sharing it with you, but
Yeah.
it also felt like looking back on a really dark time in my life.
Mm.
I'm so happy that it's over. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel like um, talking about it. I felt it like in my stomach,
Yeah.
kind
Yeah. The difference between that first experience and the second, and the kind of reflection on the love relationship you were in at the time, and how that just really wasn't working out, and coming to an end. And then this second one, which felt more like a blessing from
Yeah,
from listening to it, and this and you're in love, you're with the one you love, your soulmate, and did your
yeah,
husband see this being as well?
yeah.
And how,
Yeah,
wow, how was it for him to see
lovely. It was
that?
like seeing a really magical thing. Yeah, we both. It's one of our like we talk about that a lot. So
Yeah.
it's like one of our favorite memories together. I would say
Mm,
it was one of
mm.
those magical moments where you're like in love with somebody, madly in love, as you would
Yes.
be in the beginning of a relationship. Well, we still are, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean. It's this
Yeah.
kind of this fresh start in a way, yeah.
That's it.
Um, and as I said, yeah, we a lot of like it's it's a really we really cherish this memory together, and we like talking about it. Whereas the other memory was really hidden away in somewhere in my
Mm.
head, but it was like really far away for me. Yeah.
Yes. Did you mention, and just first of all, before I forget,
Yeah.
um, was this before you got married too? Or were you already married then? It was
No, I
before you
think
got.
it was the year before. Like it must have been like in spring or something, and we
Mhm.
got married. No, we got married the year afterwards because
Right.
we got married in the first year, Corona year, I would say.
Yes.
It was,
Yes.
you remember, which was yeah, with all the hassle that came with Corona. That was really lovely because we had
Exactly.
to do the wedding outside and had to
Oh, yeah.
for just our friends and not like 100 relatives from far away. So it was like really us and the close friends, and it was outside in the park. Yeah,
Mm.
and we even thought about doing the wedding at that spot,
I
but
wondered.
yeah,
Yes.
but
Yes.
it belongs to a farmhouse, so it's not
Mm.
like we didn't dare to do a party there, especially
No.
with the Corona times where you have like one lockdown following the other. So that was typical.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
had to find the safest spot for our wedding ceremony. But what we were thinking about it, and we had like we didn't see the horse again, but we had like a lot of magical moments at the same spot, and we still have like it sometimes feels really like the temperature would drop or be higher than in the rest of the area,
That's
and
interesting.
and
Yeah.
sometimes you would see like shadowy figures, but never again the moonlight horse, I would call it, like this really
Mm.
magical thing. Yeah? And I
So,
have to add, we were completely sober at the time, so
yeah.
we were not drunk or something. Yeah, so
Yeah. And so there's definitely this presence there, with the second experience. And can you think of anything that's around there? Did you say this was at sunset the first time that you saw?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It
So
was a sunset, and right after sunset, like when it becomes this twilight.
twilight. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And are there any kind of mounds around there, or rivers, sort of streams, or so there are mounds around there. That's
Yeah, it's not like a high mountain. It's
mm,
like the mountains probably. It's not like you expect Austrian mountains to look like. It's like
no,
this hill, a very high hill with forests on it. But there is a sacred well, is there,
right.
um, and yeah, and that's just like and it's quite close to the Danube.
Oh,
We're
amazing.
quite close to that.
Yeah. Oh, it's supposed to be incredibly beautiful.
It is,
Love to
and
go
I
and visit.
always like recently I've been listening to a lot of episodes of your brilliant
Okay.
podcast,
Oh,
and I was
thank you.
just thinking about the connection between Austria and Ireland because the Danube was called like before the Romans came. It was the Romans called it Danuvius, which was like a male deity, but before that, that was the goddess Dana, which is like connected to the Tuatha de Danann, like.
Okay, and that's where Danube comes from then.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
That's so interesting. I hadn't realized that.
um,
That's really, yeah,
and it's not very far from Hallstatt, and
right.
that's
Yeah.
where like the Celtic culture on the continent, like first. No, I think it's just like where archaeologists found it,
Yes.
but it's named after like the first Celtic period is named after Hallstatt, and it's not
Oh
very far
yeah.
away. It's like just
Incredible finds there. I mean, that's yeah, very exciting there. Wow. So this, how far away from where you had your experience do you think this, the well is situated? Is it fairly close by?
I think it must be like no, it's not close by, but it's just like within the same area of the hill.
Mm,
Yeah,
yes,
it must
yes,
be like within 3 kilometers or something. I would say.
yes.
Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say for sure, but I think from my own experience, and of course mine was with the love of my life too, my husband, but when we were in those first throes of love, of which of course we still are, but that potency, that time when you know that you're with your soulmate, and that's when we had our experience, and I came to understand that that was possibly the being that I saw was the genius loci of that place
yeah,
because somebody else had seen this being. I found out a couple of years ago when I went back to Jersey and spoke to this woman. She had seen what seemed like exactly the same being she described at just within meters of where I had seen him. So, you can think about it in terms of these beings kind of being the spiritual aspect of these places, these beautiful, unspoiled locations, and particularly kind of on top of a hill, that would, you know, could potentially tie in with these. these women, these female presences, particularly on mountains, seem to occur often. That you hear stories, in folklore as well. There are these women of the mountain that appear in different guises, and some of them are known as old hags, for instance. And it's particularly if it's a mountain that's got that sort of dangerous energy about it, in that, potentially if you put a step wrong, you could, take a fall, or it's extremely windy up there. You get a sense of the Morrigan, the, a kind of the goddess that you need to really be on your wits, have your wits about you. And yet there are these other very beautiful, peaceful places where you will get different guises of the lady. So it sounds like what you saw is an aspect of the lady. So that is interesting, and how nice that it sort of rectified the darker experience that you had initially. And when I say darker, it's not kind of judging by our human understandings and saying, oh, well, that was evil, as many people might sort of view that. It's interesting to look at the winter solstice itself, because I really felt this last year. For the first time, I kind of had a realization about how in the summer solstice that we celebrate, it's a very potent time, and it's extremely external. We're going out, we are, dancing, we are celebrating, and we're doing that with others. There's a lot of joy. In the winter solstice, it's just as potent, but it's happening kind of at a deeper level. Sometimes it's happening exactly deep within us. Yeah, because we go within.
Yeah.
And that's where we connect with the potency of that time. And for me, I've come to realize how immensely powerful and transitional that time is if we open to it. And consciously or unconsciously, you decided to go to this place. If we start with the idea that everything begins in our consciousness, then the two of you made this trip there. I mean, externally or consciously, you weren't aware, I'm sure, when you booked that time, that you were about to have a great loss. And I'm so sorry to hear that you went through that with the loss of your sister, which must have been incredibly traumatic and shocking. And so but this place, I imagine, was already booked. That you were going there. And so the timing, because there's no such thing as kind of the linear time that we are experiencing on this plane, it doesn't work like that. The fact that, right, that you have made a retreat to this place at that time, and who knows what these people, what was going through their minds when they seemed to behave in a way that you couldn't quite figure out. I mean, whether they have their prejudices, or whether they were mindful that you were about to enter into an experience, and, are these people going to have an experience that might upset them, and they were perhaps anxious about that, and that was the anxiety you're picking up on. It's hard to say, but
maybe they just felt pity, or they pitied us, maybe because they were like maybe very sensitive to what was going to happen.
Yeah, maybe. But if they were, wouldn't they have seen the comments in the book? And if they were anxious about that, would they have tried to remove it in some way? Because they must have seen it there.
They must have seen it, because within like the guest book, everyone could see it, and
Yeah.
I think they must have flipped through it at some point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one thing I wondered was, because obviously you were there at winter solstice, and I wonder when these other guests were there that drew.
Remember, I don't know. It was just like, I remember it was like maybe 10, or it was like not the other page. It was like
Way back.
way back, yeah. So maybe it
Yeah.
was, but I didn't check the date.
No.
I was just so shocked, because I just saw the drawing, and I was just
Yeah.
like, oh my God. And I was showing it to my partner, and he was like, oh my God. Yeah. We were both like, ah.
Just thinking about kind of being there, and when we have these experiences, and going back to this idea that within our human understanding, we might look at that and say, oh, well, that's evil. But actually, they're not. They just are. They're just existing. They're not trying to. Well, this is one way to look at it anyway, one perspective, that they're not trying to scare us. But in the same way that nature will cook up a really strong wind and terrify us, or a whole horse might bolt and we get that extreme fear, it's just nature being itself. And when these beings appear to us in this humanoid form, it strikes us at a really deep level. And we kind of almost think, well, they must have been trying to scare us out of there. But another perspective to take might be that this being was kind of reflecting back at you maybe the angst and the difficulties that you were experiencing in your relationship. Mm-hmm. You know, that could be one way that it maybe was kind of reflecting back at you what was actually going on between you at the time on a deep level, and that at that time, being winter solstice, where we go very deep to actually see what is it that has taken place this cycle, what is it that is potentially beginning, that has maybe ended. And because we're in the dark there, it's kind of forcing us to face things, you know, definitely encouraging us to do so anyway. Yeah. So perhaps that's another way maybe to look at what was going on there.
That would make perfect sense. And as you were talking right now, I was thinking there's this tradition in Austria. I don't know if you heard about it. It's called Perchtenlauf. And those are like this Krampus devilish like figures, which represent like I think they represent like winter and but again the cycle, and they are meant to frighten children. You know, it's a real tradition. Like people dress up here as Perchten, we call it, and funny enough, the word comes from Perchter, which is like another word for Holle, or like Mother Holle, like this fairy tale figure. And here in the mountains, or in Austria, we call it Perchter, which means translate to the bride one, which is like the goddess Bridget, probably. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yes.
But we call these things Perchten, like, and they're not bride. They are men dressed up like devils. Yeah. And they would run around, like they run around Christmas and around the 5th of January, and I think in the beginning of December as well. So all around the Christmas time, you have these traditions here, and they represent, I think, that dark side you were referring to. But yes, they do different than the entity we saw. Yeah, they have shaggy fur as well, but nothing horse-like. They're more like a devil or something with horns and really like these masks. The men would dress up with furs and masks and horns.
The figure of the Krampus is well known in European alpine areas like Austria, Germany, Slovenia and Hungary. The tradition is that on the eve of 5th of December, this large, hairy, goat-horned figure may appear and at worst may carry away naughty children in his wicker basket, or at best beat them with birch sticks or terrify them into submission as well-behaved good children. The festival of the Perchtenlauf in Austria is a similar tradition, so that villagers will dress as these figures, Krampus and Perchten, and parade through the towns. The Perchtenlauf usually consists of 2 sets of monsters nowadays, one good, one evil, but each of these figures were usually about chasing out winter spirits and battling out with each other. And that usually takes place near the solstice or beginning of January. And of course that battle reflects the dark being overtaken once more by light at the turn of the solstice, where the days begin to get longer again. So this time of year is long associated with monsters or demons turning up and wreaking havoc. From the darkness comes light, of course. That's a kind of universal truth. It's how we work with the seasons as well, because on that winter solstice, of course, it's then the sun returning, which of course feeds into the idea of Christmas and the sun being reborn, because it's the sun being reborn, the sun being reborn, as you know. So but the hooves in the snow is very reminiscent, very famous case. The Devil's Footprints. This is taken from the Chambers Dictionary of the Unexplained. An intriguing 19th century case from Devon involving the appearance of a set of mysterious footprints in the snow that reportedly stretched in an unbroken line across several parishes. Now, this happened in February 1855, and the residents of Topsham and Totnes in South Devon awoke to find a line of footprints in the snow. Now, it followed a continuous meandering course, and this is how it was reported in the Times just a week later. The track appeared more like that of a biped than a quadruped, and the steps were generally 8 inches in advance of each other. The impression of the feet closely resembled that of a donkey's shoe, and measured from 1.5 inches to, in some instances, 2.5 inches across. Here and there it appeared as if cloven, but in generality of the steps the shoe was continuous, and from the snow in the centre remaining entire, merely showing the outer crest of the foot. It must have been convex. So these tracks were made by something which could travel over the rooftops, through or over walls and through narrow drain pipes, and the tracks were said to stop on one side of the Exe estuary only to continue again on the other side, so maybe something that could fly across. And at certain points in the journey the tracks appeared to go up to and then away from the doors of houses, which is interesting for our story. The incident certainly caused something of a stir at the time. The newspaper coverage brought forth more claims and numbers of theories as to the cause. The scientific community made suggestions ranging from escaped kangaroos to hot air balloon trailing a rope or chain. However, most of these seemed to be almost as far-fetched as the idea among the more superstitious locals that the footprints were evidence of a visit from the devil. There's this energy being whipped up outside as it spins around and around and around, and these tinkling bells. So you're getting a sound effect too. When I spoke to a guy last year, he told me about his experience with Santa Claus. And, he was a grown man. I think he was in his early 20s. And he had this whole experience of what seemed to be like a sleigh landing on the roof. And
I remember the episode. Yeah.
Right. And he got this sound effect there too, these tinkling bells. And it can be a feature of fairy encounters, is that people will hear these bells. So there's something about that too, isn't there? That there's this, it kind of marks a shift. And also that you said that it was silent, that suddenly there was a strange feeling as if you'd kind of maybe shifted into some other kind of either realm or sense where things went quiet, and then really, he appears.
Quiet. You couldn't hear a thing. It went completely quiet. This kind of otherworldly quietness, I would say.
Yes.
Because remembering the whole situation, we had like the fire still going in the fireplace. It must have been like, fire makes sounds. It makes all this crackling sound. But there wasn't any of it. It was just completely quiet. Like that was so weird. And you could hear these bells ringing.
Yeah. Do you think that there was any kind of time lost that night, or does it seem to make sense in terms of when he appeared, that was at dusk or darker?
It was, I would say it was around midnight.
Right.
It was like, yeah, because it was winter solstice, so it's the longest night, so it must be like it felt like midnight. I can't
Mm,
really tell, but it had been a long time where we're just sitting in the kitchen,
yeah.
um, just reading, having this argument I told you about.
Mm,
Probably we had some food as well, but I can't really remember. But it was like it was a time where we would say like shortly before we would have normally said, well, just go to bed now. Yeah. So
yeah.
I reckon it must have been like between 11 and midnight. Maybe it was like 10 o'clock and or between 10 o'clock and midnight. I can't really tell. I can't
Mm,
remember. But it was
mm.
like in the middle of the night, I would say.
Yes, yes. And when he looked at you, do you remember anything about his eyes at all?
Yeah, they were like really dark, dark eyes. Yeah. And I would say they were dark red almost, but not like a red, glowing red,
Hmm.
like like my eyes or your eyes, but in a really dark shade of red.
Mm.
And my interpretation was he was staring at us angrily, but because of all the wrinkles and the facial expression,
Hmm.
I can't really tell.
Mm, mm. But that
This
was
is
the feeling that
what you said before. It might have been like all this dark energy or this energy of parting or something breaking apart. Maybe
yeah.
it was that, yeah. But he was just staring at us, and it felt really, yeah, frightening in a way.
Mm, mm,
He
mm.
wasn't, but it was at the same time, having said that, at the same time, it was clear to both of us he wasn't about to attack us. He was not like, you know, smashing the windows and
Mm.
jumping into the kitchen and I don't know. We were fully aware that there's nothing going to happen to us in the sense of getting physically damaged or something.
Yes. People that have seen, otherworldly beings in the form of what are described as aliens, where they see something, and they don't sort of sit there. People don't tend to react in the way that some people think that they might.
Yeah.
And you go into a different kind of state. I don't suppose you took any photos of the hoof marks or the guest book then? No.
No, we didn't. Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't.
Mm.
That, that again, I would normally say just grab your mobile and take some pics, but we didn't, which is weird because um, I don't know. At the time, we definitely had mobiles, but like not the smartphones, but I
Yeah.
think like the old ones, and they yeah, you could take pictures with them.
So when you went into the forest the next day, I mean, how did that feel? Because did you, was it the forest that was nearest where you were staying, or did
Yeah,
you
yeah.
go
It was
further
just
afield?
no, it was just like the forest that surrounded the garden of the house.
Mm,
And it was like there was no real path, or it wasn't like this nice forest where you could just walk around and stroll around. It was like um, this deep, dense forest with a lot of trees, like pine trees and stuff like that. Not pine trees. What is this? Like the normal Christmas tree is. Yeah, yeah, the fir trees. A lot of fir trees, and when you're in a forest full of fir trees, it's not like a nice walk around. You're just like trying to
yeah.
maneuver through the trees, and there was like really a lot of snow, and it wasn't like this pleasant, nice walk. It was
Mm,
more like an expedition or something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, a bit of a
Um,
challenge.
and yeah, yeah, it was really challenging. And remember we were absolutely soaked when we came back to the house, yeah,
Hmm.
and yeah, we just had to warm up and um,
Yeah.
um, have tea and stuff. It was like really cold and wet, and yeah,
But it's interesting that you even decided to go in because I'm not sure when this being, he went round and round and round and then
yeah.
shot off, did he go in a particular direction? And would it have been in the direction of the forest
We
or the
couldn't really,
woods? Couldn't
we
really
couldn't
tell.
really
No.
see it because it was like in the beginning he was like running in circles, and then he was
Yeah.
circling the whole house. And at one
Really?
point, I think he just disappeared, or like behind the house somewhere. He would just like appear again and again in front of one of those windows. Well, like the house was tiny, so you have like these, like I think it was 6 or 8 tiny windows,
Yeah.
and now and again you would see the creature or the entity, like, yeah,
Oh,
circling down.
it's I mean it's marvelous, isn't it? It's absolutely marvelous. Was he running clockwise or anti-clockwise or widdershins, as I might refer to it? Can't remember. I mean, I feel like I'm tending to sort of lean towards, and I don't know, so I'm just offering this, but I'm tending to lean towards that he's kind of undoing a relationship that's broken. And in fact, sort of, in a sense, that's kind of a blessing because it's the truth.
Yeah, yeah,
It's difficult to look at, isn't it? And it's awful, especially when we're splitting up with somebody. Um, it's very hard indeed, and it's something that sometimes we'll try and avoid or put off for some time because it's so hurtful. Particularly at a time like at Christmas too, when there's lots of family get-togethers, and you have to sort of potentially put on a bit of a face because you're in company and all of that. You're under these kind of societal pressures. Aside from the fact that it is just heartbreaking, so I just wonder if this was because you were setting something new up in your life as well that you were going to step into. And did you find how did you find that? Was that a positive shift for you?
yeah,
Did that?
yeah. And I remember at the time it wasn't like that night, but at the
Yeah,
time, in that time of the year or in that winter, it often crossed my mind, in a sense, I need to like break up, or we need to break up. I need to finish this relationship in order to get all my stuff together, all my power back here to put it into my business.
yeah.
And that's what happened in the end.
Mm,
When we
mm,
split up, like I had regained all the power to put into my business and made it running, and that happened. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm happy with it.
yeah.
So it was
Right.
the start of something new. But at the time, I couldn't see it that way. It was
No.
more like, you know what it's like when you split up. It's like you're in two minds about it, and it's like really difficult. On one side, you want to split up. On the other side, it's like, oh,
Yeah,
what's next to come? Yeah,
exactly. There's feelings there, and yeah, it's
yeah, yeah,
hard, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
I think it's interesting that he spotted it first too,
He did. He did. Yeah, he
and he
did.
drew your attention to it, and kind of what was going on in him at the time. Like
Mhm.
maybe, he knew this was coming at a somewhere deep within. He knew this was coming. And, another way to look at it is that this is kind of an aspect of how he was feeling as well. And it sounds like perhaps for a while you were literally going in circles with your relationship.
We did.
Um,
We did. We definitely did.
yeah, yeah. Did you, and I know you said you didn't kind of respond in the way that you felt you might have done, but did you say to each other, what is that about? Did you get to that point of discussion? What do you think that was
Um,
about?
we did, but we didn't really had a discussion about it. It was more like, what is this about? What
What's
could
this
that
about?
be?
Mm,
But we left it at that. We wouldn't talk about it like in a proper conversation. It was more like having all the or just asking each other some kind of question. What do you think it is? And I
mm,
remember my then partner said, "Well, I don't know. What do you think it is? I've got no idea. Some kind
yeah,
of weird ghost or weird creature or demon or I don't know. I couldn't
yeah,
really, but it didn't feel like a ghost. It was like as real as you and me.
yeah,
We saw the
yeah.
hoop marks. We could like you could almost touch it. Yeah.
Yes, I mean you've got the sound effects,
Yeah.
you've got the hoof marks, and
Yeah.
these are a feature in these otherworldly beings that are part of nature. They're just part
Yeah.
of this world like we are. It's just
Yeah.
very, very simple.
Yeah.
And we tend to think of these beings that don't exist in the same way in this physical material realm as we do. That because they can sort of flip between the realms, we imagine that they don't leave a trace, but they do. They do affect. Sometimes they do leave hoof marks and feet marks. They can be heard. They can affect, the foliage around them. They can, affect. They can make the trees move if they're passing through that way. You think about the Bigfoot with the knocking on the trees as well, and obviously leaving footprints. And you use the word demon, and this is interesting because if we kind of look, in history, the church called these beings
Hmm.
demons. Anything that was of that ilk would be labeled demonic, when in
Hmm.
actual fact, these beings are just parts of nature, as I say. And it's almost like we've kind of, in doing that, in demonizing nature, we have discarded it. Either we're told to be afraid of it, that we
Hmm.
shouldn't kind of venture into, that there's this wildness of nature that, yes, it should be respected. But a lot of the time now, it's either just completely disrespected, ignored, or we're made to think somehow it's dangerous in some way.
Yeah.
Even things like if we're foraging, there's this huge amount, or collecting wild growing herbs for our medicines. It's, oh no, that's dangerous. Don't do that. It's dangerous. These aspects and of course there's always going to be there is going to be risk, and people need to know what they're doing. But nature is nature, and there's a lot there that is there for us.
And we are part of nature as
We
well.
are
So
part of it, exactly. That we are part of it, and it is part of us.
yeah.
And there's this communion that goes on as you experienced in both situations. There's this communion where the solstice and things happening at twilight. If the circumstances align, we can have these communion, this
Hmm.
communion with nature, and we have so much to learn. And it's a
Yeah.
two-way thing. We can go to these places as you've been going, and perhaps you can leave an offering there where you saw this beautiful female form that was leading the horse. You could perhaps leave an offering there, and then you start to have a relationship, and then you really start to realize. I mean, to people that haven't done that before, it sounds a bit mad. Like, how can you go to somewhere and start forming a relationship with nature? Just try it, and it doesn't have to be out in the wilds anywhere. It could be somewhere in your local park where you just are drawn to a particular tree and you just trust that, or a particular part of the stream. Oh, I like this little spot here. I'm just going to stay here. And if you keep visiting there, you'll find that it is like a friend, and that can give you solace, particularly through difficult times. Somewhere you can go, and you will start to receive wisdom from that place. You might then notice that perhaps there's, so at the moment, or there's slightly going at the moment, but there's hawthorn berries around. So I've been exploring some new green spaces near where I live, and there's some hawthorn berries there. So one way of getting to know, and obviously make sure you're IDing, because every red berry isn't a hawthorn, I have to say that, but you need to know what you're looking for. The hawthorn leaf is very identifiable, so that's quite a good place to start. But I'll go for a walk there. I'll kind of check out this place, and then I'll bring some hawthorn berries home, and I'll make a tea. And so I'm ingesting that place and I'm getting to know it consciously.
Yeah.
So that's something nice to do sometimes. And I might go there and do a bit of litter picking. I went there this morning, this particular place, and tending for the place. So it's a two-way thing. And then you go there and you receive, and then you go there and you offer, and it's this
Mhm.
ever evolving through the seasons relationship that it sounds like you have with this place that's near you now, that you and your husband can go to and receive a real nice sense of
Yeah,
connection.
it's a lovely thought. And when you were just talking about the hawthorn, we have this
Yeah.
folklore thing. The hawthorn is closely connected to either the Virgin Mary in Austria now in Christian times, or like again female supernatural beings in a lot of stories, Austrian folk tales, I would say. Yeah, we have this connection. Um,
Yes. Yes, yes. Well, it's definitely a fairy tree. I'd love to read some of the folklore. So if you can send that to me, I'd love to read that and I'll share it with
yeah.
with viewers and listeners too.
I will. And when I prepared for this little chat,
Yes.
I was Googling Lower Austria and mythology horses, and I came across a website or images on the net, which really freaked me out. And I did I send you the picture of this?
I don't think so. No. I'll just check.
I just sent it to you via email.
Mm.
Hang on. Because I found a church, which is fun enough. It's called St. Michael's Church, my name. So, and it's
Oh,
right next to the Danube, but in Lower Austria, and it's not close to where we had the experience, but it's like 100 kilometers away or something. Not far, but it used to be. I found that on Wikipedia, so maybe it's wrong, but it used to be, or it said used to be, an old Celtic place of worship. And when the Christians came, they just built a church there, the St. Michael's Church. And I've been to the city, but I've never been to that church. And they have these special roof tiles, and they are called the seven rabbits or the seven hares or the seven horses. And you can have a look at
wow.
I don't think that look they look neither like horses nor like rabbits to me. I think they look like human faces with a like
What was the ears? Because you mentioned that it
yeah,
had
they were
animal
more
ears,
pointy
more
like
pointy.
those.
Hmm.
They're like that round
Yeah, they're round, aren't they?
teddy bear ears. They were more
Mm.
pointy, but like the face was almost like this human monkey gorilla, but white, like pale, really
Gosh.
pale, and like
Yeah,
but
that
the
does kind of
body
look
reminded me of
monkish.
it. Yeah, but the body reminded me of it. It wasn't
Mm.
that fat and that bulky, but it was like kind of a lot of muscles and not like one of those like uh, race horses or horses you would ride for races or something. It was more like a horse for heavy labor, I would say. So with a lot of muscles and big fur and stuff like that.
Do you think that it I mean, because it's like a centaur as well.
Yeah, but not like with the upper because only know the images of centaurs with the
Yeah.
like the upper body of a man. It wasn't like that.
Mm.
It was like
No.
this humanoid face on this horse-like, pony-like figure, and it had, as I said, a really like this shaggy, strong fur, dark and brownish. Yeah, but the face was pale, and it had like these pointy horse-like ears.
I mean, I'm just looking at that. So these figures sit atop the church,
Yeah,
and as kind of gargoyles do in
yeah,
our kind of cathedrals and churches
yeah,
over here.
yeah.
So you think it's a kind of like a form of I guess, protection, because, images like this would be placed there to, dispel demons, etc., etc. But I mean, it is incredibly close to the sort of being that you
Yeah, it
saw.
is. It is.
It would be really interesting to see if these images are replicated anywhere else, in that local vicinity.
I couldn't find anything on the internet,
Mm,
but who knows?
it
Yeah,
might be somewhere.
I could find when you Google like Lower Austrian and
Yeah.
mythology and horse like stuff. There's not a lot of folklore with connecting horses to some kind of nature spirits or something like that.
They often appear in folklore. They are sometimes related to water as well, and that can be because of the relationship between, white horses and the sea, etc., the
Okay,
sort of the
okay,
waves coming in. But they are definitely often featured in folklore, either that the good folk, the gentry are, riding horses, that the fairies will plait their manes. There's another, big aspect of folklore around kind of Devon and Cornwall. So there is this relationship between fairies and horses. There's the story that this guy shared. It is called The Wretched Rider in the Thorn. I don't know if you've listened to that one, but there was
yeah,
a
I did.
right.
I did. Was that with the creature like
It
hanging
was
to
on
the
his,
mane of
yeah.
the horse? Yeah.
Horses, they do tend to feature strongly in the folklore and in tales, as in sort of people's first-hand experiences, and spirit horses. The idea of spirit horses galloping, so they're definitely kind of connected in with that otherworldly sense of nature. Horses, perhaps they are slightly within the worlds as well, between the worlds. Who knows? Perhaps there's an aspect of them that wildness that can still connect with the other world, but it would be really interesting to look further into that. Yeah, so with the ears were more pointed, what sort of animal?
I would say like a horse. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a horse or
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, and it all blended in together really well because it was one entity, it was like one creature, but
Mhm.
it had this really weird humanoid face
Yeah.
within the structure of the horse, I would say.
Yeah. And its mouth, would you say that that was the part that was most monkey-like then?
Yeah, because of the teeth. It was like these sharp teeth
Mm.
there and really prominent.
Mm.
And the nose were like, I would say, more flat than our nose, but maybe
Mhm.
like just a very flat, big, broad nose.
Wide nose,
Wide,
right.
wide
Broad and
nose.
flat.
Yeah, yeah.
And did you get a sense of how tall it was or how tall it stood at the window
Yeah,
there?
because it was just like the height of the window, and I would say it must have been like 1.5 meter
Right.
because it could like comfortably. It was like right in front of the window, and it
Mm.
just stared into the window, and I would say it was probably like 1.5 meter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this with me. This is absolutely fascinating, and it really does tie in with Krampus and the
Yes,
solstice. These otherworldly beings that come to us at these times with. There's a gift there. There's a
yeah,
gift within all of that. I'm really glad to hear that things worked out for you in the end as well, and with your work also. Your new love relationship that blossomed, and then a successful work going forward. So
thank you.
that sounds really good, and it sounds like you're kind of open to this. Did you ever have any experiences as a child? Do you remember?
No, I didn't. No, no, not really. I didn't.
No.
But I was really, really close with nature. I grew
Mm.
up in a huge family. I had we were 6 kids at home.
Yeah.
So when it got too busy and too noisy inside of the house, I always fled into the garden and
Yeah.
I would climb the trees, and I would hide within the trees. That was like my sanctuary as a child. I
Oh,
was really close to nature, spent a
mm,
lot of time outside. And yeah, that was actually a part why I finished my normal day job as a social worker,
yeah,
because I just decided I can't spend that much amount of time within office rooms anymore.
yeah.
I want to spend more times outside and like, in a lovely environment.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
I'm still close with nature, I would say. But I never met like an entity, a nature spirit, if you would call it, before. That was like the only two times I
Yeah.
really saw them. Like I, there were a lot of times when I felt close to certain energies.
Hmm.
I work with runes as well. Like that's
Right.
it's not the main part of my business. The main part is of course running boring training courses for social workers and
Okay.
doing some teaching. But I'm doing it aside of that. I'm working with I'm casting runes. You know, and part of it is get into touch with the other person and the environment. Here are my runes. You know,
Oh, fantastic. Wow. So
I
you
make
made
them
these
myself.
yourself?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I do, and
Great.
I really cast them. Yeah, it's not like
Oh, could you show us? Could you show us? Yes.
and you know, then I the person like um, is is posing a question. Uh, into the room, and I pick up on that, and I have a drum as well. But I don't use a drum. The person who's having the question or wants the rules to be cast for them, they uh,
They beat the drum.
they beat the drum, and
That
then
is
I cast the
excellent.
runes, and then I read them. Yeah, and that is like getting in touch with their energies as well in a
Mm.
very close and deep way. Um, but again, that is more like a trance thing, but it's not like seeing a physical being. It's all in my head and
Hmm.
on
Hmm.
another level. But those two experiences I told you about, they were like you could touch those entities. I didn't.
Yes.
and,
Yes.
and I was too scared to touch it. I have to say the first one. But the second one, the moonlight horse or the lady with the moonlight horse, I would love to touch her. That was
Yes.
so beautiful, but I didn't dare to because it was, and it wasn't, that wasn't far away either. It was like maybe 500 meters away. It was like
Right.
not very far, but
Mm, mm.
it
I
didn't move.
mean,
Yeah.
you could I mean, roses make nice offerings for the ladies, so you could
Okay.
always take, I don't know if you have a garden where you are and whether you have roses in your
Yeah.
garden, you could take roses or petals up there and lay those. Obviously, they're organic materials. It's a nice offering to leave. It
I
might
just
be an idea.
had some there, as you can see,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
for my husband, but
Yes. Well,
I
even
could use
better.
some.
That's a beautiful gesture if they've been given to you in love and
Yeah.
represent the love that you have between you, then that's a really nice offering to give too, isn't it? So
Lovely idea. I will do that. I need to go to my garden anyway, very close to the spot, because we
yes.
still have tomatoes. You can't believe it. It was like really sunny and nice. Now it's getting colder, like the last
Mm,
2 days. But before that, it was like incredibly warm
sunny.
for October and sunny. And we
Yeah.
still have the tomatoes and red cabbage and lettuce as well. And
Blimey.
I need to collect that and harvest that because now it's getting really cold during
Yeah.
night. And
Spring
part of the
again.
climate change, I think it's not all horrible. And
No.
I like the thought of it might be horrible for us, like for mankind or us as human beings, but not for nature because nature is always there and it always will be. And
Yeah.
I was just picking up on what you just said before, is like when you said like nature can be dangerous. As we are part of nature, I think we can be very dangerous as
Yeah,
well. We just need to check the news. It's
I know.
always proof in that how dangerous we are, and
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
maybe those beings are less dangerous than we are,
yeah.
but we are just scared of them because we're not used to see them a lot.
No, no. And I think if we were less concerned with ourselves and more tuned into nature itself and our place in all of this, we would not be
Yeah,
making such stupid choices or ignorant, sort of thoughtless choices about the way we do things. But I have this hope that we are moving in the right direction. I like to think that we're moving in the right direction, but we're having a real tricky kind of birth into this new world, if you like, a new world in terms of sort of the age of Aquarius, that we're moving from the age of Pisces, the kind of ego, solar plexus way of being that we've had for the last 2000 years, into age of Aquarius. But then there's this kind of Pisces energy that's like, no, we like it, for some people, they like the wealth and the power and the control, right? Because they benefit from it.
yeah, and
um,
maybe they are scared of what's
they're
next to come.
scared. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What happens if we let go?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What happens if we let go? We're all like that in a way, that we're living our lives and, fear leads us to think, oh, but I can't do without that thing, or I can't stop being like this because what happens, this is my identity, this is who I am. And yet, if it's kind of forced from us, we find a new way. And this is where I feel like the tide is turning anyway. And there's this sort of shift between the old world trying to sort of control things. At the same time, we're seeing it crumble because
Mhm.
it's just the tide is that we're moving to somewhere new, and so many of us are there already, and we're kind of making this new world in the way that we would like to see it, working more with nature, connecting in with each other, seeing the love that exists between us all, that there are real no boundaries, only ones that we've created, and that there is another way to be. And all the time there's this kind of crumbling old world still, arguing with itself, but there's also this new world forming. And I think if we kind of place our attention there and ask for the help of nature with that too, I think we are headed there. But I think it's going to be a bit bumpy for a little bit longer, and we just have to
Yeah,
kind of
probably.
batten down the hatches, keep doing what we can do to, in our own kind of communities and with each other, express our love with each other and with nature within that space that we can, and just do what we can to help that movement. And I feel like eventually we will get there, but it's hard, and it's very hard to see all the suffering in the world at the moment.
But you're doing such a lovely job, and you're doing such a
Oh,
important
thank you.
work, and I really think you have that kind of gentle and very lovely way of pushing the world into or people into the right direction in
Oh,
the sense
thank
of
you.
in the direction they have to go anyway. Yeah, and I always admire how calmly and spoken you do what you do, even though you are listening to the most crazy and amazing stories, you always keep your calm and nice way, and I really like listening to the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, great work. And I really came across it by chance. Really, I'm a history nerd, and I think it was the
Ah.
Witches of Scotland or something. I was listening to it, and Spotify always suggests you more
Oh,
podcasts.
yeah, yeah.
And then it was the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast, and I was listening to it, and then, as I said before, it triggered the whole memory thing, and I had to contact you.
So interesting, isn't it? As some people do say that they, say the same, that it sometimes triggers memories from childhood that they had kind of like hidden at the back, and then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I had that happen. Well, thank you for contacting me. And I have to say, it's very lovely to hear your kind words about the project. But it couldn't happen without your stories. And this is where it's a sharing, isn't it, of us just being able to come together and talk about what it's like to have these very real experiences. And then they're not hallucinations, and we're not mad. We are. It's just a very normal thing to happen, and it's kind of been cancelled that to talk about these things, that is shameful or humiliating some way.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's just ridiculous, because we need to talk about this. Is important, and it's just very much part of our world. And it's good to know that it's gaining momentum, and that by talking about these things, we are starting to reach back out to nature and have these relationships again. So thank you for sharing.
you're welcome.
Time to
Thank you to our guest for an absolutely fascinating experience. It really is quite pokey, and we can just imagine how we would feel if we looked up and saw that face at the window. What I find quite amazing is that the sign of Sagittarius runs from November the 22nd to December the 22nd, so right on the cusp of the solstice. And the symbol for Sagittarius is, of course, a half man, half horse. I couldn't help but wonder if this had some significance when I realised afterwards. The symbol of Sagittarius is meant to speak of a man's struggle to attain spiritual development rather than sink into his animal nature. This is further magnified by the bow and arrow that the archer Centaur usually holds aloft in the symbol of Sagittarius. And centaurs themselves were thought to be wise, adventurous creatures in Greek mythology, but, like man's struggle, were also given to uncivilized behaviour. There are depictions of horse-man beasts, and one of the most interesting ones is pictured in Monstrorum Historia, a book which was published in 1642 by Ulisse Aldrovandi, and it was part of an early collection on natural history. This book is really amazing, and it depicts some unusual mythical, or are they, human beings. On page 99 of that book, there's a horse with a human face, a drawing of a horse with a human face, and I've added this to the show notes. The whole book is a very strange and fascinating work, and I would recommend you take a look at that if you're interested in kind of oddities. Aside from centaurs, the other creature that I've read about is called Todorats. These are described as demons in Balkan folktales and are half human, half horse, but not the same as the centaur. They move through villages and kill people in their path by trampling them, but they usually appear at the end of winter, which doesn't fit so well with our story here. I think it's most likely, as I said, that the being appeared in response to what was going on in our guest's relationship, or at least it's interesting that it did appear at that time, and that they chose to go there at that time. So maybe they ended up in that creature's space rather than the creature ending up in their space. I have found that archetypes, deities and fae beings can appear and do just this, reflecting back at us what's going on in our lives. However, it doesn't explain why children in the past had apparently seen that same creature but on another occasion, if what they wrote in the visitor's book was correct. Of course, we don't know what time of year that happened or what was going on in their lives at the time, but it does make you wonder if this being is associated with that area or that time of year, and occasionally likes to make himself known. It would be very interesting to know more about that specific area. In any case, as we know, this time of year is particularly magical, so use it. Go deep and explore. I have recently created a new pathworking for exploring our relationship with ancestors, and it is available for free on my Patreon page. You'll find it in the Pathworkings collection. Let me know how that goes for you. I did it recently and it was very powerful and extremely revealing. Massive thanks to our guest for sharing his wondrous stories here. It was such a powerful visitation, and I would love to know if this being is still turning up there now and wreaking havoc for the guests of that Airbnb. And how much did the owners know? I would love to know. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, dear listener, for listening this year, and I wish you a very merry Yule wherever you are and whomever you are spending this time with. This year has been a transformational one for the podcast as I move into doing this full time, and for the next couple of months I'm also going to be writing my book, as the deadline is at the moment in March. So the episodes between now and March may be released as videos on YouTube, and perhaps slightly less frequent for the general public as I pour myself into meeting my writing deadline. I will still be releasing bonuses on my Patreon group though, and I've got a few lined up that I'm going to be releasing there. If you can support the show, please join us there, where you'll hear the entire full-length version of this episode, including the other experience with this being of light on a white horse. It's beautiful. Much love to you all as we step into 2024, which by all accounts will be a very different year to 2023. It's time to rise up. Trust your own mind as we still battle with all the nonsense that we're presented with out there. Look after your own health. Don't bow to anyone else's idea of who you should be, and always remain curious. There are interesting pathways ahead. Much love.